The subject of this film is the reciprocal gaze. Obviously, when you go to cinema, you are gazing upon a screen. Long shots, still, face to face with the audience, sets up a dynamic whereby the audience themselves completes the story, completes the relationship of the gaze. There are other dimensions to our life besides those very personal things that deal with the nitty-gritty of daily living. There are other nitty-gritties of daily living that we don't have the words to describe, and I would call those metaphysical. I would call them transcendental. I would call them the vivid unknown. Those are only terms to describe that aspect of ourself which is most present but unknown to us still. So to have the opportunity to have someone else, as uncomfortable as that might be for some, it could be almost like a deprogramming experience because we're not used to that. It could be seen perhaps as confrontational or aggressive. That's all up to the individual viewer. Each person sees a different picture. So this is really to put a dynamic in play. I would call it the vivid unknown, so that it has an opportunity to become, as it were, incarnated between what's happening on the screen and the body sitting there looking at that screen. This reciprocal gaze. My own personal feeling of photography is that the blacker the blacks, the more magic there is in the image. So black and white, it gets rid of the representational aspect of color, which for me personally contemporizes the image. Can it be beautiful, powerful, moving? Yes, but photography doesn't have to be about representing exactly what you think your eye sees at the time in a more perfected form. It can transform it through another form. Black and white seems to be the origin of cinema, or the origin of the image. Silver gelatin, those have a power that is almost beyond of the subject. It is the articulation of the subject in the medium, and the medium is more in play for me in black and white, infrared, silver gelatin. It allows you to see and to feel what is present but can't be seen. In a two-dimensional medium, a flat surface, basically, a surface medium that has no depth, the opportunity is through black to create the illusion of depth, or the metaphysics of depth in a flat surface, and that brings up gives the possibility of bringing the person out of time, putting them in a completely different space. This is not aimed at your intellect. It's aimed at another center. It's aimed to elicit the aesthetic triplets that exist within each person and that are different for each person. And those are sensation, emotion, and perception. All of us experience those in a different way. If we're open to look, to see, to hear, if you look at something long enough, you might start to see something. That's not me saying it. This is like almost universal wisdom. If you're observant, if you're focused, if you're attentive, if you're not distracted by gizmos and desires and consumed by ambitions, and if you're open to the place you're inside of, at that moment, those places can start to speak to you. I more have a feeling that almost overtakes me, and then I spend months, if not years, trying to understand what that feeling is. And If I feel it, then in some way I have authorization to speak about it. If I don't feel it, then it's merely an abstract concept. It doesn't have to engage who I am. It just engages my mind. In what I do, whenever I say I mean we. It's a collaborative form. It's way beyond my individual capacity to achieve. I have to work with other people. My effort is to pull together a crew, people more capable than I. I always work with artists that are more talented than I am, for sure. And together we create, let's say there are 15 people who are in the, let's call it the mainframe of the film. They're not just there to take my orders. They're there to collaborate with me and create with me the film. That being said, my role in that whole process, one is to assemble that team, to know that people usually of that capacity have egos the size of office buildings, but to be in a collaborative forum, one cannot have vanity of ego, because we live in this process that I'm involved in. It's a diacritical process. You're not asking people to tell you what you want to hear. You're hoping that they tell you what's inside of them. I end up, therefore, being everything from a mother to an assassin to pull off a film. As it were, you live many lives, die many deaths during that process. It's very dynamic. Doubt sits on me like a shadow at every phase. I'm never completely comfortable. That insecurity that I have personally drives me to give as much perfection to the form as possible. In what I do, because I give up the spoken word, I, on the other hand, have not given up narrative as a form. It's just a non-spoken narrative. And to do that, you have to play with it. It starts to speak to you. I do a lot of writing in the beginning of the films to get not only myself focused and centered, but to bring my principal collaborators at least on the same page. And again, it's not an intellectual activity, it's an activity of aesthetics. How do you know when you get there? You have a feeling for it. Let me give you something I'm sure you already know. If you look at anything in nature, it has the perfection of looking completely as it should be, with all of its little turns. Everything has a perfection to it in its incompleteness, in its humility of where it is. This is what you strive for in art, that it looks perfect as if it is supposed to be that way. So at the end of the day, it's like having a kid. Once the kid comes out, the kid has a life of its own. You have to let it go. It's like the little bird in the nest. It stayed in the nest all the time and never learned to fly. So you have to just let it go and move on.